Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Trend Report podcast. I'm glad you're here with me today for what I know is going to be a really fun conversation, packed with a lot of information. And I actually want to welcome my first ever international guest outside of North America. And my guest is here with me today, all the way from Amsterdam. And he's going to talk with a weird accent, but that's okay. You guys listening. But I'd like to welcome David O'Koyman to the episode today, who is the founder and CEO of Nook. Hey, David, how are you?
Hey, Sid, great to be here. I'm very happy and I'm very proud to be representing our international community, multi-country based international community, with me being in the Netherlands, being Irish, with a business based in the UK. So it's a pleasure.
I mean, you literally are covering the continent over there, aren't you?
I certainly am. I do my best, and I used to do a lot more before COVID.
So you're in the Netherlands, the company's based in the UK, and you're Irish.
Correct.
That's awesome. So how long have you lived in Amsterdam?
So this time around 2 years, but I had lived here for a decade. Previously, as soon as I graduated design school out of Ireland, I hit the road, traveled around Europe a little bit, ended up in Amsterdam on my way somewhere else. And as is common with Amsterdam, got stuck and spent a decade.
There you have it. There you have it. Well, David, I'm excited to have you here to have our conversation today. And so I want to dive into a little bit about who you are and a little of your story. So share a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are today and what you've been doing over the years.
Sure. So I come from an engineering background. My father, grandfather, and so on back to the 1850s were all engineers for the Irish train company, railroad company. So I was mooted to be, some sort of train engineer right up until the point that I guess I was lucky to be in that wave of kids growing up, coming from working class background, had the chance to go to uni. And it was really by chance that I managed to sort of stumble upon the subject of product design, because I loved technical stuff. I loved engineering, but I also loved art. I loved form. I loved aesthetics. And those two didn't often go together. If you wanted to study one, engineering, the art was in with the economics and the other subjects. Right. You couldn't get to it. So I had to maintain that in my spare time. So when I discovered product design, there was like lights from heaven and angels singing. So I spent a bit of time, put a bit of effort in, managed to learn a bit of a trade in the skills of design. And then in my last year, I applied for a competition and was lucky enough to come first, and won the opportunity to travel with a little bit of help from the Society of Designers in Ireland and the Industrial Development Authority, as it was called at the time. And so they gave me a few pounds, as they were called, Irish poots in those days, and a whole bunch of amazing connections to some wonderful organizations. And I headed off traveling with my portfolio under my arm.
Look at you go. That's awesome. So David, what was the first product that you designed? Or do you remember?
So the first product, I'm going to stand by the product that won me that competition. Okay. Because there was an actual manifestation of it, which was made. And it was, and incredibly enough, there's echoes of it in what I'm doing today. So the premise of the competition was there's a Society of Designers headquarters in Dublin, and it needs some sort of customer experience portal for visitors attending the center. So what would you do to welcome visitors to the center and to inform them on the subjects that they might be interested in around product design? So I created this booth, would you believe? It was made of glass and wood and some ceramics even, would you believe? It was really nice form. It had a hexagonal kind of a shell around it so that you could cluster them together. And it had touch screen, which was, unheard of at the time. And it had this really nice feature that I still kind of use today in my design as well, that it had a big light that shone above it when it wasn't being used to kind of say, I'm available. It sensed you when you approached, and the big light would drop down to 0. And a little intimate light would come up around the keyboard and the sitting area to sort of give you a sense of, I'm recognized, I'm here, and this is my private little space. Wow. And a small little anecdote about how I created that presentation Photoshop wasn't a thing, right? I mean, CAD was barely
before
a thing.
Photoshop.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
Before Photoshop, right? So I wanted to show all the different layers of this thing somehow. So I came up with the idea of I would start with a base piece of white A4 paper, so that's like your letter size,
Yeah.
with a wireframe drawing, and then with acetate, so clear plastic, sellotaped really neatly across the top, but foldable in layers. So you dropped it down, and each layer had a label on it, and it would say what it was. And by the time you put all 4 layers down, you had the whole real sort of 3D picture of what the thing was. So essentially, Sid, I invented Photoshop before.
You're taking credit for inventing Photoshop. Like, okay, you're the
somebody saw that and they were like, this would make a great software.
Because, I mean, you're the Al Gore of Europe. I mean, Al Gore claims he created the internet, right? He invented the internet. Right. So you invented Photoshop. That's great.
100%. That's the hill I'm willing to die on.
Okay. I love it. I love it. So David, let's talk a little bit about your organization. I want to talk about how the design of the Nook came up, but tell us a little bit about Nook and about your organization.
Sure. So for the longest while, I've believed very much in the new ways of working that now COVID has kind of exploded and accelerated. I believe and have believed for the longest time that there's a new and interesting way, not the only way, but another way of building a company that doesn't have to revolve around shareholders, that can be done privately, but grown organically, sustainably, mindfully, slowly, in other words. And that can be done by reaching into your network, reaching out beyond your network, and creating a sort of nebulous collective of like-minded folks who maybe you've met over the years, or you know how quickly you can meet somebody and get a sense of that kind of person, shared purpose, right? So shared purpose-minded folks who believe in a different way of working, who believe in sustainability, who care about people, places, and planet, I suppose, would be the 3 things. And so having previously built a company and sold it in 2011 and ended up with 23 shareholders, 25 employees, an 11,500 square foot factory, shipping all over the world, I decided I wanted to do things differently and I wanted to be hyper nimble. I'm a real people person, but I'm a terrible manager. I'm a terrible manager.
All right. So hang on just one second. I want to,
and more flexible.
You broke up there just for a minute. Guys, we're recording over Zoom and sometimes the connection across the pond, as they say, not that great. And we just had one of those moments. So hang in there with us. So you love people, but you're a terrible manager.
Right.
Listen, it takes a lot of courage to admit that you're a terrible manager. So kudos to you for actually standing up and owning it.
Yeah, and more than own it, you know, I realized, and I think this goes to the sort of cornerstone of my philosophy, that if I build around recognizing my strengths and then support those weaknesses and those gaps with other people who love doing the things that I'm terrible at or hate doing, then that can be strong. And so that was my approach: build a network, manufacturing under license, use third party, use virtual assistants, use freelancers, and use people who own businesses who we enjoy working together and have a shared sense of purpose and can help each other out along the way.
So the term that you used earlier when we were chatting was a social entrepreneur. A bit of a digital nomad almost, right? I mean, you could live anywhere.
And do. And I do. And I intend to, you know, when COVID allows me to do so again, I'd always had the ambition of having possibly 3 locations to move around between, and possibly even others that I don't know about that just come and go depending on the sort of network and the, you know, the people in the network as they come and go. Okay. So I have the long-term view of buying land and starting using prefab, putting in a couple of units, having a bit of co-working, dropping in a swimming pool in a container or a sauna, having some Airbnb going on there so it generates revenue, living there part of the year, moving out and letting somebody else move in, you know, and running the business from there, because all I need is a laptop and a phone.
I mean, I hope the listeners saw that. I mean, I got the visual as you were describing that, especially the container, the swimming pool container. I think that's awesome. I have seen some really, really cool facilities built out of containers. If you're ever in Texas, you have to, which is where I am, David, you have to go to Waco. And in downtown Waco,
Okay.
there is a block that the buildings have all been built of containers. And they're
Okay.
going all different directions, and they're vertical, they're
Hmm.
angled. I mean, it's wicked cool. So I love that
Yeah.
reuse, if you will, that repurposing of something that and into architecture, right? So how
Yeah.
did the Nook come about? I mean, what was the inspiration behind the Nook? And because you designed it, so tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. As with many designs and creations, necessity is the mother of invention, right? But you know what sits right beside necessity? Frustration.
Oh yeah, right.
And I was dreadfully frustrated with what had become of the open office. So
Mm,
I alluded a little bit earlier, having sold a company, and I went to work for an organization with 170,000 people worldwide, and I was a global product manager for them. So, very lucky to be able to travel the world and, get to experience literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different workspaces. And honestly, Sid, I mean, it's 1% maybe that had been really built with people and community and collaboration, but also deep work and people's brains
mhm.
and the diversity that exists in people's brains, and really empowering them and thinking about the times that people want to work at and building all that flexibility in. So that was it was like, okay, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
And it's in particular a disaster for introverts,
Mhm.
and it's an absolute hellscape for people on the spectrum, or neurodivergence, as I've now come to understand the term to be, because I think we're all somewhere on the spectrum. It's just more obvious with some than it is with
Yeah.
others. So I wanted to solve that problem somehow. I'm what Yuval Noah Harari, well, it wasn't his, but it's through him that I learned it, terms Homo prospectus, which is basically the species that wanders the world, imagining alternate futures and building plans to take us there. And that's what I can't stop doing, wandering around the world, seeing ways to fix it, and then wanting to do something about it. So I wanted to create a sanctuary space, in particular for introverts and people on the spectrum. But I knew in my heart that it would benefit everybody.
So you traveled the world, you got to see all these different types of workspaces, and you saw the challenges, you saw some issues with it. And so you wanted to do something for introverts, people that create a sanctuary space for introverts, people that are on the spectrum. And so did you just like sit down and draw it on a napkin, or tell me about that? Like, tell me how you came up with the concept.
Such a cliche, isn't it? There's
Yeah.
actually a napkin with
Is it
this.
really? Do you have
There's
it
actually,
framed? Please tell me you have it framed somewhere.
I do, of course, have
Good.
it framed. I
Good.
have indeed, and I have the second drawing too, which moved. I love grid dot notebooks. If people aren't familiar with them, they're absolutely a staple diet of my life. You can use them to write because there's a structure of lines, but you can also use them to draw because it's just a grid of dots. So the second drawing, more with detail and working all the components out in various views. What could it be? That's all on grid dot notebook, and that's framed too, of course. Yeah, I
Grid
literally sat
dot
down and figured it out on a
so
piece of paper.
say the website again, grid dot notebook. That's it?
So it's called a grid dot notebook, but that's a generic term. It's not a
Oh,
particular product. You can find them now from all. I think even Moleskine
got it.
makes one, and a whole bunch of the famous notebook makers make them.
Okay, got
Mhm.
it. Sorry. I thought you were saying when you said dot, I thought you were saying like a website. So my apologies. Okay, that's great. So you've got both of them, you got them
Oh,
framed.
sure, right. I never thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is the language, a little bit of the language barrier, because English is not your first language, is it? Your first
Lovely.
language is Irish.
Well, actually, funny enough, you'd have to go back a little while
Yeah.
before you find the majority of the population having first language as Irish. So there's only a corner of Ireland now that would be first language Irish.
Oh,
So
wow.
we did all grow up with first language English,
Sure.
second language Irish.
Okay. So there's a history lesson right there in this podcast. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
So you drew it
right.
out and then you said, okay, let's go make it. And then what year was that you started making the Nook?
Mhm. So that was the middle of 2016. And the first thing I did was I made one for myself, put it in my house, got rid of my dining table, got rid of my sofa, because the original iteration had this hyper modularity that you could convert it from a work pod into a sofa, and even into a bed. So it was, I'm always over engineering things, Sid. I can't stop myself. And so at first it was this all singing, all dancing, attempting to be all things to all people kind of product.
Yep.
So I put it into my home and then invited lots of friends around and said, come on, help me critique this thing.
Sure.
And it was pretty clear, pretty quickly, two things. One, that it had some fundamental flaws in its ergonomics and its form and its dimensions. But two, people loved it. People absolutely fell in love with it. I did too, but I knew I was biased. So I wanted to get other people to come and check it out, and people absolutely loved it. So then that gave me the confidence to get a couple of real ones made and find a partnership in a co-working in Bristol, where I was based at the time, to show it to the world.
Okay. So the concept and idea came up in 2016. You did your first prototype of 2016. When did you go into full production of the product?
September 2016, and went revenue positive within a couple of weeks.
Look at that. Okay. That is a great story. Cause honestly, I didn't know the answer to that question. And I expected you to say like 12 to 18 to 24 months, but in the same year, and you became cash positive in the same year, which means you found the right idea. You found the right product. You came up with the need. You delivered a product that people not only needed, but they wanted. And that's pretty fantastic. If you guys have never seen the Nook, you got to go check it out. We'll drop the website address in there, and then you got to go check out their really cool configurator. I've referenced it in a couple of episodes. So go check out the configurator too. But so David, you said in the beginning or this conversation that one of the things that you did with designing the product was making it a sanctuary space. Let's talk about that. And then the terminology you mentioned a few minutes ago as well, neurodiversity. So let's talk about those two things, because I know you're pretty passionate about both of those.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I wanted to do was really create somewhere. I think spotlights are very important. Spotlights in the sense of how we feel in the spotlight in the open office. I'm telling you, Sid, I'm a hyper extrovert. I'm something of an ambivert, I suppose, because I hate phone calls. I really hate phone calls. They make me nervous. And so when I get a phone call with other people around, oh my gosh, I start to shake almost with anxiety. And I feel really very much in the spotlight in the open office. As much as I'm a social butterfly, and you wouldn't guess, to look at me, and that goes to a little bit about the judgment factor and not judging a book by its cover. There are people in that space that are dying. They are dying of overexposure to other people. They are dying because they're dying inside, because introverts have their own energy. They don't need you to give them energy. But you as an extrovert, I'm not talking about you now, Sid, but you as an extrovert, as in who, listener, you take energy from others, and I do that all the time. I walk down the street, right? And I'm with someone. It is not enough for me to observe an interesting thing and internalize that. I have to go, hey, see the thing, acknowledge the thing with me, tell me you like the thing too, or you don't, or whatever, but just, I need feedback. I need this constant feedback loop. So I'm taking energy from others by that. And therefore in the open office workspace, which was built by extroverts for extroverts, because extroverts are the loudest people and the squeakiest wheel gets the oil, right?
That's true.
So
it's true.
I wanted to create this. It's so true. It's how our world was designed. And that's why it's really important to include everybody in the design process. And listening is the most important tool, right, in the design process. So basically, I wanted to create a space where people could step into, but that did not isolate them and excommunicate them from the workspace that they went to for a purpose, right? If you're going to go and lock yourself away in a meeting room, you might as well be working from home. You might as well be working from somewhere else. So the whole premise was to create a balance between separation without isolation. A little, remove the spotlight, create some calm. And now I'm calming down, right? Because I'm very animated, obviously. But create some calm. And this is something that happens when people get inside the Nook for the first time. Two things happen. The first is they go, what?
Yeah.
How? How? Why? How? What?
Yep.
And then they go, and you can see things lifting off their shoulders, and you can see them just starting to recharge themselves and feel this moment of calm. And it is incredibly profound what you can do with as little as 15 or even 5 minutes, taking a step out of the bullpen.
Right. And into the Nook. So let's talk about neurodiversity. I don't know that a lot of people listening actually understand what neurodiversity is. I learned a lot about it from our mutual friend, Kay Sargent, at HOK. And so share your thoughts about neurodiversity, and then designing for the masses is kind of what the many, I think, is how you described it.
So indeed, really high level neurodiversity is the natural differences that occur in the human brain, right? And underneath the umbrella of neurodiversity, which includes us all, which can be often a misunderstanding of the term, there are people who you would class as neurotypical, and that really just means that they fit in the societally accepted norm of what, you know, a person is and how they should socially interact and carry themselves. And then there is neurodivergent, and as you know, as I have said in the past, and I think possibly in conversations that we've had, you know, it's a spectrum, and at some point on the spectrum, you start to get it starts to become clear that you have some neurodivergent in a particular direction, but it's not this like straight line and you're like more neurodivergent this way and more neurotypical this way. It's more like, you know, you see those statistics in sports where you've got different strengths, and then they create a graph of those strengths that are very individual to you. Mm-hmm. That's what it's like. They say that if you've met one person with autism, what that means is you've met one person with autism. That's as much as you can learn about autism.
Sure.
Because it's totally unique, right?
So neurodiversity then really incorporates all of us, and you have the neurodivergent, which is the person on the autism spectrum and things of that nature. And then you've got the neurotypical,
ADHD, autism, Tourette's, dyslexia, etc.
Sure. And then you've got neurotypical, which could be most of us, but I think all of us have some form of neurodiversity, especially now with all that's been going on with COVID, right? And the return to work just really beginning. And those of us that are in our age bracket, David, may not have been tested for certain things like ADHD, and maybe we do indeed have it, or some form of it that we're not aware of. So I mean, I think we all sit in that bubble, if you will, to some degree.
And there is a huge increase in graduates coming out of university with a neurodivergent diagnosis. And that's not because we're becoming more neurodivergent. It's because we're catching it. It's because we're able to identify it. It's because we have the tools to understand it. It's because we now appreciate how it sits in the human brain, and we're still very much in the infancy of this whole understanding. And you know, it's only really a couple of decades old since we started to move the needle on this, so we have a long way to go. And I honestly think, Sid, that we're going to look, you know, we're going to sit 20 years from now, maybe 50 years from now, and we're going to look back and we're going to go, oh my gosh, the things they didn't know about how the human brain works, and the things that they were leaving on the table as a result of not understanding that.
Yeah, so powerful. And there are really smart people that study this, right? And really smart people that are looking to understand this even more. And as science continues to advance, our knowledge will continue to advance, which hopefully correlates, and it does correlate, to advancements in product development, product design, the development of workspaces, the way people work and how people work, and supporting that. So let's talk about your philosophy a little bit about designing for the many.
So yeah, indeed. So I guess the way to coin it is that design for the extreme benefits the mean. That's the nice sort of poetic expression, which essentially means that if you design with extreme requirements in mind, and neurodivergent is one of those, but so is accessibility issues and disabilities, etc., you end up with outcomes that benefit everybody. And there's myriad examples of that. Alexander Graham Bell was developing a hearing aid for his grandmother when he invented the telephone. You know, subtitles were originally created for people who are hard of hearing, but I use them now to watch a Facebook video while my partner sleeps beside me in bed. Yeah. You know, Alexa and Siri are, you know, built on the back of, you know, voice to data instructions for greater independent living. And you want the best example, we're using these devices which were invented, or certainly he's considered the father of modern computing and artificial intelligence, Alan Turing, who was, it is now mostly agreed, had Asperger's and suffered in various ways, and of course was a gay man and persecuted for that at the time too. And so I think, you know, if you take those things and multiply forward 20, 30, 40 years, that gives you a bit of context for where we are right now, where we could be.
Yeah, absolutely. And who did you say the inventor was? You broke up Alan there Turing. For a second. Say his name again, please.
Alan Turing. So he's also the gentleman who helped to break the Enigma code and hasten the end of the war. It's estimated, World War II, it's estimated with that effort, he contributed to saving approximately 14 million lives. That's a conservative estimate. And with his invention of Christopher, which is the name of the computer that he invented, he heralded essentially this laptop, my iPhone, and the devices that we're communicating on now.
Okay, so I find that really interesting. I'm fascinated with people in history. So we will see if we can't find an article about Alan Turing and the development of Christopher, and we'll drop it in the show notes for you guys so that you can actually see. I'm going to be excited to go learn about this as well. So when you think about the future of the workspace, David, what are some of the things you would like to see in the workplace for the future?
Well, I mean, everything that's happening now is an acceleration of what was happening, but you know, incredibly slowly before COVID came along. So I'm really keen to grab this change moment to incorporate really the needs of the individual in the space. Now that sounds scary to a lot of people because, you know, how do you cater for everybody and their idiosyncrasies? But you know, to reference the wonderful Kay Sargent and the folks at HOK, the answer is options. It's very simply options, and it's including people in the conversation. And that goes to my previous point too. It's not just about designing for the extreme, it's designing with the extreme. Because if you do not, you are leaving all this incredible brain power on the table. So I would really like to see inclusivity playing a role in how we build a better workspace, not for purely ethical and inclusive reasons, but because the best solutions lie down that path. And I would hate to miss out on that.
Well, I love what you just said, because I'm also hearing it. I mean, the way I would reframe that, if you would, David, is include the people in the process that are actually working in the space. Don't sit at 30,000 feet and say, do what we used to do this. And to some degree, we still do it. The cattle call, right? The farm, the Dilbertville, and we're just going to put 500 workstations on this. And we don't include the people in the process. So what you're saying is include the people in the process to get the best idea of the way they work, how they work, so that you can provide products and solutions to them that are going to support their work, which then has so many positive benefits. It's going to lead to increased productivity, increased mental health, increased physical health. I mean, so many benefits by listening to the people actually working in the space.
And iterate on the process. So it's not a case of designing a workspace and then going, ta-da, it's the perfect workspace. Carry on, toodaloo now, see you. But design the space to be hacked. Design the space to be adapted, design it with tools in mind, give people tools, and for God's sake, give them permission. Permission to change the space and make it work for them. There's some amazing research from the 70s, which still is relevant today, where they were measuring productivity in the workspace, cubicles back in those days. If you remember those, I do too. In fact, they're still quite prevalent in North America, perhaps more so than most places. And so what they did was they created a baseline by bringing people in and getting them to do a certain acuity test. And so that got them their baseline. So it was, here you are, here's your cubicle, do the test, measure you from the set of results. Okay, next set of candidates, come on in. But first, we've decorated the space with some plants. So there's some nice natural elements now in the space. And you can probably guess what I'm going to say. The results went up.
Yeah.
Really interesting. There's 2 more tests and it gets really interesting, Sid. And the next one, when the candidates came in, these are all different candidates, right? But chosen to be similar. On the next set that came in, they handed them plants and they said, you decorate the space to your choosing. And then it gives this sense of ownership now. Not only do we have biophilics incorporated in nature, which is proven to improve our productivity, but we've crafted it for ourselves. And that ownership has a profound effect on a person's comfort in the space. And then that affects their ability to focus and concentrate and do good work. Results went up again. The last one is my favorite.
So they come in, actually.
They hand them the plants.
He's got a huge smile on his face as he's about to say this. You guys don't have to see that, but
you don't know what's coming next. You do not know, unless you know this research.
I don't know the
research.
Research. I've not heard
what's coming next.
All right, tell me. I'm anxious.
So next group comes in, hand them the plants. They decorate the space, but before they gave them the test, they took away all the plants, and the results crashed below the baseline. It has a profound effect to pretend to give people autonomy in their space, and then in actual fact control them, tell them how they should do it, and tell them not like that. You need to trust them. You need to give them that autonomy. You need to allow them to be able to craft even just a little bit, even just locally being able to tune the lighting to suit your personal needs without affecting anybody else, can have a profound effect on how you connect and feel personalized in that space.
That's awesome. I love that. I've not heard of that research before, but I mean, it's spot on. And your product kind of does that too, right? Because the Nook is so customizable. The benches can come out. This is not a product pitch or a presentation, but you can dim the light. You can change the color of the light. You can customize it the way you want to. You can remove the seats from it. I mean, it's got all that kind of built into it. I think that's pretty awesome.
It was indeed designed to be a hackable space, because I guess one of the strengths that I have is knowing my weaknesses. And I'm not a perfect designer, and I know I don't create things that are then finished forever and never need to change. So what I like to do to overcome that, and because I'm also keenly aware that the world changes and you can't design for the future because it hasn't happened yet, you don't know what it's going to be. So I like to make stuff that's hackable. I like to make stuff that doesn't need to be hacked. It does what it says on the tin. Absolutely. And the cornerstone of Nook, the space, is a triumvirate of, it's an intimate personal environment, which is very important. It manages noise to remove distractions, but doesn't, as I said, doesn't excommunicate you from the space, doesn't isolate you. And it has this ingredient that you can control the lighting in the space, and that has a profound effect on your brain's ability to process information. It can really help if you have dyslexia. It can really help if you have autism. And it can help generally in terms of your mood, even the temperature that you feel. But furthermore, and this is where it gets really interesting, and it wasn't designed with all these things from the outset. A lot of this has been done in partnership with really amazing organizations. I love to integrate technology into the product. So what I did was I created a platform, a hackable platform that people can take parts off and add parts to, and a technologist can come along and bake in some new technology to it. We have a really nice example with a care home where we've incorporated Samsung screens, Amazon Alexa Show, Bose headphones, a scent generator. And what it does is the occupant of the care home gets in with their therapist, and they decide, they get to choose, are you going to go on a coach, a boat, a train, or a plane? And whatever they choose, the screen turns into a window on the world. And all of the sort of effects, the smells, the sounds, the screen creates this almost out of space experience that this device becomes imbibed with. You are now in a train. And they even get the staff on board that they come along and they say, welcome to today's Orient Express to wherever. Can I take your order? But what it does, first of all, it gets people out of this dreary, drab, sometimes depressing environment. It invigorates them. It also puts them in a very receptive mode for therapy. But it's not dressed up to look like a train. That happens in the mind. And that means they can then use it as a Zoom pod with their family, or they can use it for other purposes as well. So it's sort of got this hyper dexterity to it. And I love creating a platform that other people can put their expertise on top.
So that's pretty exciting. And I love the way that, especially with all the passion at which you described that. I mean, it's pretty awesome. So, David, are we going to see you in October?
Oh my gosh, yes, I cannot wait. I'm absolutely chomping at the bit to get over to you guys. In the meantime, we've got a wonderful roadshow happening in
that's
May.
Right. Yeah, the roadshow's coming up.
Just so exciting. And so I did want to get a plug of that in. And I'm hoping I might be able to get in for the end of that, depending on what's happening over here with vaccines and travel allowances and things like that. But definitely October.
Yeah. So what David is referring to is the Spring Breakout, which is a road show being sponsored by the Business of Furniture, Nook, as well as Indio playing a role in it. And it is a 8-city tour starting in Dallas and ending in Chicago the last 2 weeks of May. And Nook is part of that, along with a lot of other manufacturers. If you're not familiar with this, go out to the Business of Furniture's website and click on the information about the Spring Roadshow. It's going to be really cool as it goes. Literally, it starts in Dallas, goes all the way up to New York, with stops in Atlanta and Charlotte and Philadelphia and India, and then it comes across to like Indianapolis. I think, I don't know all the 8 states or all the 8 stops, but it ends in Chicago. So it's really exciting. I talked to Stuart about it. Stuart is Nook North America the other day, and there's a lot of fun things planned for this. So, and if we can find any article information about it, we'll drop the links in the show notes for you as well, so you can see it. So I'm going to, as we start to wrap up, David, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. What's your favorite product that you've ever designed?
Wow. What a question. Gosh, and I'm going to go through the archives now in my head very quickly because I've had some great fun designing some really meaningful stuff that's hung around for quite a while. A lot of stuff that wouldn't be terribly recognizable because it just sort of blends in, but TV stands that would be underneath Philips and Sony TVs, industrial bread slicing machines, medical devices, and housings for computers, furniture for all over. But one of my favorites, because of the profound impact that it has had, apart from Nook, was a seal. I hope I don't put anyone off their dinner now. A seal for a colostomy bag. And it was a real problem when this medical organization came to us to ask us to help improve the design. The seal was leaking and it was very difficult to get it off. And then sometimes when you pulled it off, it would come off too quickly. And then there would be, it wasn't pleasant. So this was in the 90s. And it was right at the advent of stereolithography, 3D printing, using lasers in a vat of this curable liquid. So we had this amazing process, and we totally reinvented how that seal operates. And instead of a pull off, it was a sort of a snap together and a click, and it was really easy release. But you had to pull it in a very specific direction, which was unnatural for it to fall off. It was wildly successful in terms of the impact that it had on people's lives. And that's something that I still find a lot of satisfaction thinking back on.
That's awesome. Congratulations to you. So I want to comment on it, but before I do, how many products have you designed? Do you know the number?
I've no idea. I've never. That's awesome. Why don't I know these things? These are great questions.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So
a couple of hundred
at least, right? So what I love about what you just described about the colostomy bag was we as consumers don't realize the thought that goes into some of the products that we use, and that people like you didn't design the bag, you didn't design the process, you designed a seal for it to close it. And I don't know that we think about that. We just look at something and go, oh, well, this is great. But it starts with a design. It starts with a need and then a design. And so literally, and we'll end on this, and I'll let you comment on it. Design is all around us. Product design specifically is everywhere that we look.
It's in our entire built environment, and it's in software as much as it is in hardware. It's, you know, it's user interface, it's customer experience. And that's the thing now. It's, although it's stuff, what we're really designing is your experience. And how does that stuff enhance your experience or get in the way sometimes if it's bad design? How does it improve your life? How does it help you to get where you need to get to? How does it move us on as a species without destroying the planet? How do we balance all of those things and come home at the end of the day satisfied that we're contributing in a good way and we're leaving a good mark, leaving a legacy, and being good stewards while we're here, right?
That's awesome. So the next time that I come across a bad product design on something, I'm going to photograph it. I'm going to send it to you, and I'm going to say, David, fix this, and then go to this company and tell them how to make this product better. Because I think back about, you know, it's simple things that it's like something you're trying to do, it doesn't work, and it should just be super simple to open that or to do this, and it doesn't work. And you look at it, you go, well, this is a really bad design. David's going to fix it for us.
Yeah, you know what happens when bad design occurs? It's the motivations get twisted upside down, and cost or speed to market, or, you know, some sort of, we have this abundance of this material or whatever it is just upside down thinking occurs and gets in the way. And you know what, often the worst thing to hear is, well, we've always done it like that. Well, that's why we should look at how else we could do it differently, because look at the mess we're in in many ways. So, you know, I understand why bad design comes about, but there are good tools in design thinking which can help you to avoid those pitfalls.
That's awesome. So David, it's been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate you being here with me today. So if any of our listeners would like to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Well, I'm like the only person on LinkedIn with the name David O. Coimin, O''Coimin. I am impossible not to find on there, but definitely hop on nookpod.com, and you'll find a whole bunch of stuff about us and contact details in there too, and some great blogs about the stuff that I care about as well. So yeah, I'd say those two channels.
So we will we'll drop your email address and the link to the Nook website in the show notes as well. And if you're a frequent listener to the podcast, you know the guidelines about reaching out on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn, but when you hit that connect button, be sure you hit add note and let David know that you heard him on the podcast, and that's why you're connecting him. And please do not send a blind request without letting him know why you're connecting with him. So start the conversation, guys. David, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you, hopefully maybe in May, because I think I'm going to join in for a couple of stops along the way of the Spring Breakout. But if not, I definitely look forward to seeing you in October at NeoCon 2020/2021.
Sid, I can't wait. And it's important that we get together, because we need to record parts 2, 3, and 4, because we scratched the surface. Okay. Thanks very much, Sid. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Have a great day.
Likewise. You too.